All right. Well, good evening. This is a nice intimate crowd we have tonight. It's all right. I know it's dark. It's a Thursday night. People are probably cozied up watching what The Last Survivor is. No, that's finished. The Block or something. Anyway, but you're in for a treat this evening. We're going to be talking about tobacco control and the tobacco industry in the Asia Pacific. The accent is Canadian, so don't let that bother you. It's been told now. You can put it aside. Okay. So why do we worry about tobacco use? I mean, this is pretty obvious, right? But I think it's really important to continue to hammer home this point that many people have made before, is that it's the only legal product sold on the market today when used exactly as the manufacturer intends will kill you, most probably. Like, that's extraordinary. Stop and think about that for a minute. This is a product we allow to be sold on every street corner, in every city, in every neighborhood, all around the world, all over Australia. It's probably easier to buy cigarettes than it is to buy fresh fruit and vegetables. Certainly in outback Australia it is. In the most rural places in Australia, it's much easier to get your hands on a cigarette that will kill you than nourishing food that will, give you vitality and energy. And we used to say that half of all smokers died as a result of their addiction. But now we know that for continuing smokers, so smokers who don't quit, 2/3 of them will die as a result of their smoking addiction, their nicotine addiction. And that research comes from Australia, from Professor Emily Banks, if you're interested in that. Now, we've come a long way in tobacco control, so it's easy to kind of be like, this is exciting, we're in a utopia now. Nobody smokes anymore. Isn't that what the Queensland slogan is? No one smokes here anymore. And it's, when we look back on, say, these ads from 1933 that first appeared in the Journal of the American Medical Association, a journal that I would love to get published in one day. It would be a real good career boost. They actually allowed Camel cigarettes to be advertised after careful consideration to the extent which cigarettes were used by physicians in practice. There's some examples of those ads there. So yeah, I think we can rightly celebrate. We're no longer, advertising cigarettes to doctors. But have we solved this problem? What does tobacco promotion and industry interference in tobacco control look like today? We're really lucky in tobacco control as well that we have what's called the WHO Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. You probably all heard of the Kyoto Accord. It's kind of the most well-known international UN treaty. Well, we have one, the only public health treaty that exists is for tobacco control. And it was actually conceived as a doctoral dissertation in 1994. So if any of you are thinking of doing a PhD, this is the standard. Can you get yourself a global treaty out of it? Hey, if you can get yourself a journal publication out of your PhD, you're doing well, so don't stress. It was opened for signature in 2004 and came into force in 2005, February 2005. So it's going on, 15 years now. And the Framework Convention obligates countries and parties that sign it to implement what's in it, to do what it says. It's not just a piece of paper that's not worth what it's written on. You're obliged to actually implement the things it tells you to and to report on your progress. So what's in there? What does it tell you we have to do? It's essentially a combination of these sort of 5 things that make up what the FCTC is about. So in the center, we have tax increases. It's the #1 way to get people to reduce the amount they smoke, to prevent children from smoking, and to help smokers to quit. Anyone have an idea how much a pack of cigarettes costs in Australia today? Yeah?
I think it's about $50, $60.
Not quite that much, but it's that would be for a double pack for 50. Yeah, it'd be around $30 for a pack of 25 or so, yeah. But yeah, if you're getting your double pack of 50, you're right, yeah, bang on. That's a lot of money, right? By any stretch of the imagination. And, smokers nowadays don't smoke a pack and a half a day anymore. The average amount that people smoke every day is less than half a pack. And part of driving that, obviously, is the cost. It's just far too expensive. So that's a cornerstone, price. You've got to work on price. If cigarettes are cheap, anything else you do in tobacco control is probably going to have no effect. Bans on advertising, including at point of sale. So you ever gone into a shop? In Queensland, are they under the counter or are they behind a curtain, in cupboards? Cupboards? Yeah. And there's usually the quit line number on the cupboard as well. Yeah. Yeah, and exactly. Yeah. And they're meant to keep those cupboard doors shut so you can't see what's inside them. Advertising campaigns, mass media campaigns, hard-hitting ones. Australia's had some of the most hard-hitting media campaigns in tobacco control. The squeezed artery. Does anyone remember the sponge ad where you squeeze and the black tar comes out? It's an iconic ad. The thing with those ads, though, you take them off the air, they don't work anymore. They require ongoing funding, ongoing messaging, and it's kind of been a hole in the national tobacco control strategy in Australia as of late, is we haven't had good national campaigns, and we know for a fact that they work. Quality warnings, impactful warnings on cigarette packs that are rotated and influential, including plain packaging. And then at the top here, we've got smoke-free public places. Now, smoke-free public places is an interesting one. Does anyone know why we have smoke-free public places? What's the basis of it? Why do we have them? Where does it stem from? Yeah. To reduce exposure? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It actually comes, and the reason why I have a picture of the airline up there is because it was flight attendants that were the first sort of group internationally who had to work in smoking airplanes. So think about that, tubes in the sky filled with smoke on a 12-hour shift on a long-haul flight, and you're a non-smoker. Yeah, we have someone who used to be a Emirates flight attendant and back. And so the basis of smoke-free public laws is about workers' rights. And I think a lot of that has gotten lost lately about debate about accommodating non-smokers and whether we should allow vaping. The root of these laws is occupational health and safety. Is to prevent, yes, it's nice when we go out to eat as a customer that we're not exposed to tobacco smoke, but that's quite a fleeting exposure for most of us. If you work in an environment like that every day, 8 hours a day for 30 years, you're essentially a smoker. And so that's the basis of those laws. But a side benefit of smoke-free public places laws, in addition to protecting workers, is that they also decrease smoking rates. But that's not their intent, but they have that effect. And you think about it, if you can't smoke at work, can't smoke when you go out, your flatmate makes you go smoke in the backyard, it kind of makes you feel like, you know what, maybe I should just not smoke. But that's not the reason why we have smoke-free public places. And I know I'm really hammering this, but it's coming up in debate a lot now about role modeling and the reasons why we should or shouldn't allow smoking in certain spaces. Let's remember the basis of these laws, about protecting workers. So, Australian smoking prevalence data. This is a pretty easy graph to understand, but I'll just sort of point out some features here for you. Is this pointer working? Okay, so the line at the top is the good news line. These are people in Australia over the age of 18 who have never smoked. We're getting upwards of 60% of adults who've never actually smoked at all. The line in the middle here, this green line, light green line, is people who are ex-smokers. So you can see we have almost double the number of ex-smokers as we do current smokers. I think that's a really good news story. That means it's absolutely 100% possible to quit. Smokers quit all the time. They just need to be given the right environments to be able to quit. The right policy levers need to be in place. And of course, the right supports in place to help individual smokers to quit as well. The line at the bottom here starts out as a pretty good news story, but it's kind of flattened out in the past few years, which, is a bit discouraging for a country like Australia that's leading in tobacco control. And that's because, when I know we're having plain packaging up next, we haven't done a lot since we got plain packaging. We've kind of fiddled around at the edges. We've put tax increases in, but they're planned. People know they're coming. The tobacco industry is able to adapt its prices. Smokers are as well. Whereas tax increases used to be spontaneous and happen overnight and were dramatic. The last time we had a dramatic tax increase was in April 2010, where the price went up by $2 a pack overnight, and it was a complete surprise. Smoking rates tumbled when that happened. So yes, it's a good news story. This looks great. But I don't like this little flattening bit here. And I know that Coral's going to talk about what can we do in the future to get that flattening to keep going down. Okay, so let's look now across the region, the Asian region here. So tobacco industry's largest markets are obviously in the most populated area, which is the Asian region. And this graph isn't great. It comes from Tobacco Atlas, so I apologize, the color scheme is not great. But essentially the take-home message here is you've got down at the bottom, you've got really low prevalence data, or really low smoking rates. And then our immediate neighbors here, really high smoking rates. Anyone here been to Bali for a holiday recently? Been over to Indonesia? It's like being in a different world. You can still advertise cigarettes on television there, and it's reflected in the smoking prevalence data. I will just point out Africa in the middle here, particularly sub-Saharan Africa. Smoking rates there are incredibly low. And it's not because of effective tobacco control. It's because the tobacco industry has not yet moved into those regions. There's a lot of poverty, of course, which is the primary reason they don't have a lot of disposable income to spend on tobacco products. We could actually avoid having a tobacco problem in Africa if we wanted to. It could be the one region in the world where we don't go through this cycle of increasing smoking rates, enacting all these policies and bringing smoking rates slowly down, and all these people dying from lung cancer and heart disease. We could avoid all that if we kept the tobacco industry out of Africa, which I think is kind of exciting to think about. Okay, so the focus of my work is primarily on the tobacco industry and how they play a role in tobacco control. And this is an older quote, but I still love it. Neglecting to discuss the industry's role as the disease vector in the tobacco epidemic is like refusing to discuss the role of mosquitoes in a malaria epidemic. From a public health perspective, it's imperative to go to the source of the problem. And if we didn't have a tobacco industry that was making bazillions of dollars around the world, we would just enact tobacco control policies and be done with it and move on. But every time we want to enact a new law or fund a new program or implement a new policy, we meet resistance from the tobacco industry and its allies. And that's why tobacco control is inherently political. It's not simply a public health best evidence, what's the solution? We have a political arena with realities we have to play in, that we're up against a global corporate who wants to do everything it can to protect its bottom line. And of course, we have completely opposing agendas in tobacco control versus the tobacco industry. We want to prevent uptake, we want to assist people to quit, and we want to reduce exposure to secondhand smoke. The industry wants to maximize tobacco use, maintain current smokers as continuing customers, and prevent the erosion of smoking opportunities through secondhand smoke laws. And when we succeed, the tobacco industry fails. There's no sit down, let's hold hands and come up with solutions together so we can all win and sing kumbaya. That's not going to happen. And I think it's dishonest to say that we can have successful tobacco control and we can still maintain this vibrant tobacco industry. The tobacco industry has used all kinds of tactics to interfere in tobacco control, to try and prevent us from adopting successful initiatives. Public relations is pretty obvious, public lobbying, they form smokers' rights groups, they create alliances, they intimidate tobacco control researchers, they fund youth smoking prevention programs, say, oh, we've got this covered, guys, you don't need to worry about laws, we'll just educate all the young people about how harmful smoking is. They sue governments and other entities who are trying to limit their businesses. They've funded smuggling and the black market of tobacco, all kinds of things. These multi-strategies they've put in place. I'm going to show you an example of a recent example from Australia now, of tobacco industry interference.
Governments need to think about the bad consequences of their policies.
When the government put up tobacco tax,
my customers didn't stop buying cigarettes.
But I lost sales on bread,
milk and magazines.
The government's latest idea is plain packaging for cigarettes.
it won't work.
it won't work.
But it will make it harder to run my business.
Plain packaging. It won't work, so why do it? Authorised by us and the Alliance of Australian Retailers, Sydney.
The Alliance of Australian Retailers. They sound like a pretty good organization, wouldn't you think? Who was in that ad? Who were the actors in that ad? Who were they? Yeah.
Probably people who work in the tobacco industry.
Yeah. But how were they presenting themselves? Who were those people? They were just small business owners, right? A nice mix of people, obviously a large immigrant population, people who obviously do not drive Ferraris or wear $5,000 suits, right? These are everyday people who are just trying to make an honest living and have a fair go in Australia, right? The Australian Alliance of Retailers. Well, that Australian Alliance of Retailers was formed the day after the plain packaging bill was announced. And who funded it? To the tune of $5 million, split between 3 tobacco industries: ITA's Imperial Tobacco Australia, BATA's British American Tobacco Australia, and PML is Philip Morris. There's nothing authentic about that Australian Alliance of Retailers. It is a fake organization with a fake message, all in service, because no one would listen to a tobacco executive going on TV and having a fit because we wanted to help people quit smoking. So they reframe it as being about small business people. But of course, small business people are just pawns like everybody else. The tobacco industry is just using them. We actually have, as part of the FCTC, the Framework Convention, an article called 5.3, in setting and implementing public health policies with respect to tobacco control, parties shall act to protect these policies from commercial and other vested interests of the tobacco industry in accordance with national law. This means our governments are obliged to not allow the tobacco industry to interfere with public health policy making. If we are truly enacting the FCTC, we will take every step to ensure that. That means no secret meetings with ministers, no lobbying behind closed doors, no taking money, no inviting the tobacco industry to be at the policy-making table. So how are we doing on this in Australia? February of this year, Philip Morris took to the media and said, "Oh, we're really excited. Philip Morris Australia has been awarded the federal government's Employer of Choice for Gender Equality for the 4th consecutive year." This is a Facebook post from the Philip Morris Australia Facebook page. The average gender pay gap in Australia is 14%. We've put measures in place to ensure ours is almost zero. How does your workplace stack up? Close the gap. So you have this company who kills 2/3 of its best customers bragging about the fact that it has gender equity, and our own government awarding them for it. And yet we're supposed to be trying to shut this industry down because public health cannot win if the tobacco industry is winning. And I just find it really interesting. I could probably give you a whole lecture on how the tobacco industry plays with the feminist agenda and plays with female identity, but I'll just give you an image of an old ad just to give you sort of a flavor of where the tobacco industry is coming from when it comes to feminism. This is an old ad. I don't know if you can read there. "Blow in her face and she'll follow you anywhere." Okay. So I think I'm just trying to make the point that it's quite in vogue now to be seen as an equitable employer, to be a feminist in your ideals and principles. But this is the history of what we're talking about here. They just see women as more consumers for their products. Particularly in Southeast Asia, where smoking rates among women are incredibly low. They're a target audience.
Recently, Marlboro has boosted its global market share thanks to its worldwide Don't Be a Maybe, Be Marlboro campaign. And if you're thinking, what the f*** does Don't Be a Maybe mean? Please let this video by the people responsible for the campaign explain it to you.
As a brand, Marlboro was not resonating with adult smokers, even though its values of freedom, authenticity, and master of destiny were. Smokers missed the essence of the cowboy, which led us to our opportunity. Eliminate the word maybe from our smokers' vocabulary to become the catalyst that inspires smokers from just thinking about life to taking the lead in their life. To live the Marlboro values. To be true, bold, and forever forward.
That is a pile of horse shit.
I just don't want that to play again. So, yes, John Oliver, he could put us all out of work. He's much funnier than your average public health researcher. But yeah, so Marlboro, this global brand, I want to talk now about advertising as another way the tobacco industry really subverts public health and makes it near impossible to do our job properly. And you can see they have this brand that they claim doesn't appeal to youth. They don't want to sell it to youth. It's only for adult smokers who choose to smoke Marlboro. Well, you can see from their marketing campaign that's completely ridiculous. So why does the tobacco industry oppose all these things? Like, why are they so concerned with all these measures? When, on one hand, they say none of this is going to work, that the reason we shouldn't adopt things like plain packaging and tax increases is because people are just going to continue to smoke anyway. It's not going to have any impact. And this is an old internal document from Philip Morris from 1984. I think it just really crystallizes this whole point. It is our opinion that the single most important issue facing our industry is the erosion of the social acceptability of smoking. And that's what sort of all of this does. And as you erode the social acceptability of smoking, you also erode the social acceptability of the tobacco industry. What's really good shorthand for corporate malfeasance, right? Just like the tobacco industry. Do you want to compare a corporation behaving badly, like big oil? Oh, they're just like the tobacco industry. Pharma, people will even say this. They're just like the tobacco industry. And everybody gets what you're talking about. It's really good cultural shorthand for companies that lie, deceive, addict, and kill. And that's not good for your corporate brand if that's what you're well known for. So advertising is really critically important to them to try and push back against this social denormalization. If you go to the Philip Morris website today, apparently they're designing a smoke-free future. They're not interested in selling cigarettes anymore, despite all the effort they put into Marlboro marketing around the globe. They're more interested in selling this product called IQOS. Has anyone seen an IQOS before? Heard of IQOS? It's a type of e-cigarette, sort of, yeah. It's in between, kind of. It's a heat not burn is the technical name for it. So it still uses tobacco, still creates a little bit of smoke, so it's not completely an e-cigarette, but nor is it a traditional cigarette. They're not allowed to be sold in Australia. They fall foul of our regulatory framework. They do get sold in New Zealand, where I'm from. I'm on their text messaging list. That's how I got this. While not officially Philip Morris's line, people say it stands for I quit ordinary smoking, which is just kind of an internet meme thing. It's not something that Philip Morris actually came up with. It seems to have caught on, though. So is this genuine? Does Philip Morris really want people to give up cigarettes, move to this reduced risk product, and never smoke again? Well, let's have a look at what they're doing, Philip Morris International is doing in Indonesia. So this is for their brand called A Mild. They have an online brand community where people who create things like you would sell on Etsy, like crafts and arts and things like that, all sponsored by A Mild. They ran a pack design competition to design the new limited edition A Mild pack, which was called the Go Ahead Challenge. They sponsored the Sound Adrenaline concert series. See the big A there, which is the same as the A on the pack. And they have a mass following online, particularly from the Sound Adrenaline concert, encouraging people to tag Sound Adrenaline in their posts. They had picture frames and the whole kind of thing you would normally have in an event. So this is a company that supposedly wants a smoke-free future, and yet all this youth-friendly advertising is going on in Indonesia. It's not very convincing. And if you're interested in this, this is a paper led by my PhD student that sort of presents a case study of how a millennial tobacco company markets in Indonesia. Here's some more examples of billboards in Indonesia. You can still advertise by the side of the highway in Indonesia. The Don't Quit LA Lights one, it's a bit on the nose, really. I'm surprised the PR agency that came up with that got away with it. And then this one here, Sampurna, which is owned by Philip Morris International. Remember, the people who want us to have a smoke-free future, supposedly. It says in Indonesian, dying is better than leaving a friend. Sampurna is a cool friend. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, what else can you say about that, really? Yeah. They're also using paid influencers. Are people familiar with the term influencer? You all on Instagram, when you're scrolling through and someone's putting on makeup and they're, pushing a brand of lipstick or whatever, or someone's got a new protein shake. It's that kind of thing. The tobacco industry's in on it as well. This is an example from a big study that was done by a Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids that unearthed influencers who were being paid by Philip Morris International, and again an example from Indonesia, that's Marlboro. The other prong of Philip Morris's attempts to rebrand itself and to say they're a changed company is they fund the Foundation for a Smoke-Free World. So the foundation was formed in 2017. The head of the foundation is a man named Derek Yak, who used to work for the World Health Organization's Tobacco-Free Initiative, which is just a little bit of a gut punch, really. It's gone over to the other side now. If a group of colleagues over in the UK looked at the Foundation for a Smoke-Free World's tax return to see what kind of things they were funding, they spent, of the $80 million annual donation that they get from Philip Morris is their only funder, by the way, they don't have any other funding partners, they spent almost $7 million of it establishing the Centre of Research Excellence in Indigenous Sovereignty and Smoking, which is based in New Zealand. We're so proud. Another $7.5 million was spent on communications, the majority of which was to PR organizations. They spent $7 million on staffing, $20 million on grants approved for future payment, and didn't spend about $47 million of it. Doesn't look like they're funding a lot of legitimate research activities that are going to reduce smoking rates. But was this a good return on investment? So again, one of my other PhD students and I, we did a media analysis to see what kind of coverage the Foundation for a Smoke-Free World was getting in the global news media. And remember how much money they spent on PR? They didn't really get a really good turn on their investment because over half of the articles were opposed. Only 1 in 5 showed some sort of even weak support for the Foundation for a Smoke-Free World. And most of them framed the funding as not being credible due to its links to the Philip Morris International, that it was simply a tactic to mislead and undermine tobacco control. And there was only a small number of articles that said that PMI, Philip Morris International, should actually be a part of the solution. So again, it's heartwarming that it's not very effective, but it is concerning that over the next sort of 10 years, there will be $1 billion spent through this foundation to try and interfere in effective tobacco control. Of course, I've used lots of Philip Morris International examples, but the other companies are doing it too. These are for Vape e-cigarettes. These are influencers who are being paid in New Zealand to post on Instagram. They're usually from the fashion sector, the design sector, and music and industry. And then sort of the final image I'll show you, they ran a contest at a music event. They wanted people to Instagram a photo of themselves with Vape. The best photo would win free tickets to Fatboy Slim, and this was the winning entry. So yeah, Vape is all about quitting smoking. That's the focus. They want people who are hardened-on smokers who've been smoking their whole lives, can't quit. This is their last hope at quitting is a Vape device. Clearly that's not who they're going for, and that's what they've been selling these products on the basis of, is that they're for crusted-on smokers who've done everything they can to quit and just need a harm reduction measure. I'm not quite sure that's the message that's getting through there. And I'll just give a little plug at the very end here for Stopping Tobacco Organizations and Products. This is funded by Bloomberg Philanthropies and run through Bath University. I'm a very small part of it, and it's about monitoring the tobacco industry on a global scale so we can keep more systematic tabs on how it is that they're undermining tobacco control. Thank you very much.